how long have you been aware of the crop circles, and how long have you been occupied by them?
Since the late 1980s, and when they first came forward, I looked at them and I just suddenly thought, these are our friends. This is our friends, you know. And so from that moment on, I was caught, and I just had to follow the track, you know. One of the interesting things with the crop formations also is that, especially men, we go into this looking for the big answer. And what you've got to learn in this game is there is no big answer, and if you need a big answer, you've got to get out of this business really fast because it'll drive you mad. And so really it's a process where we're being revealed answers, mainly through, in a way, through negatives. In other words, the answers we're getting is it's not this, it's not that, no, that answer isn't correct, no, you're wrong on that one. And so we're left with an open space, and yet there's a lot there. And so one of the big psychological changes you have to make is it's necessary to be willing to drop our addiction to answers, which of course, if you're educated, Western and male, this is a big problem. Yeah. This is a big problem. And so I love it for that reason. Yeah. And also that to me is one of the signs that we are actually involved with a very high source. We're involved with some beings who really are amazing teachers, and they're taking us through a process which is very important for our evolution, but they're not giving us any answers. Not directly, not answers that we can say, this is it, that's that. Okay. You know, and I love that. I love that.
But why do you think this is going on at this exact period of time?
Well, I think there's the obvious one, which is our planet is in danger. And time, we don't have much time, so that's one of the answers. Another one is it's addressing Westerners, and particularly the men. Not only the men, but it really is addressing the men with our rational questions and our science and our maths and things like that. And so it's really trying to change, somehow the phenomenon is really trying to change our mindset and our psychology. I think also it's because we are now ready to receive new ideas on a much deeper level than we have ever had before. And the events of the 20th century have led us to this. And here we are, it's roughly 100 years since Einstein and relativity theory and things, which was the last big jump in rational thinking. And there's also the spiritual awakening that is going on, and has been going on for the last 100 years, but particularly since the 1960s. So it's a combination of all of these things. And the next question, of course, is why is it mainly happening in Britain?
That's right.
And this is an interesting one, because I think the short answer on that is, if it were happening in the States, it would become a religion. The same would be the case in Russia. If it were happening in Germany, it would be difficult intellectually. If it were happening in France or Italy, it would be a threat to the church. And there's something about the Brits which is both rational and slightly crazy. That's our nature, you know. We are slightly crazy. We're eccentric people, and so there's something where that combination of our rationality and our craziness means that if they can get this past the Brits, they can get it out to the world. Of course, there are secondary things, such as the world now speaks English. So you might as well do it in an English-speaking country if you want maximum outreach. Yeah. Plus, there is a lot of earth energy. There's a lot of sacred, ancient earth energy in Britain. It's a powerful country in that regard, and it was so 5,000 years ago. It's on a similar level to somewhere like Israel or North India or somewhere, or parts of Mexico. And so in that regard, it is a good place to do it. You know, even though it is happening also in other countries, Germany, Holland, Hungary, United States and Canada are the main places, and there have been signs in probably about 15 or 20 other countries. Italy, for example, there are some happening now there. And one of the interesting things is that it seems now, in the last few years, it's really started happening in places where people are interested.
Yes.
And so it's as if whoever's creating these things are responding to the people who are interested, you know.
But why aren't the media more interested in this?
Well, this has to do with vested interests and the ownership and the purpose of the media in... We talk about a free press, but there is a social control element in the media. I'm sorry to say this, but that is the truth. And then the media, they like nice, neat answers. You know, it's either right-wing or left-wing, or it's profit or it's loss, or it's win or lose, you know. And so they don't like questions which can't easily be answered. So the media have only really liked this when we get to the question of hoaxing and of people making it, Doug and Dave and all that, which is a nice, neat thing. You know, it wraps it up in a parcel. We can put it away. That's solved and finished. Now let's get back to the football, you know. And so really the media don't want to do this one. Even people like the BBC don't want to do this one because it's a big question and it concerns the future of civilization. So the reason, one of the main reasons why the media are not doing it is for the same reason as why they will not talk about metaphysical issues. They will not talk about things like free energy technologies. They will not talk about some of the very, very basic issues that we need to bring about in the 21st century, such as just basic justice in the world. You know, they don't really want to talk about these kinds of things. And so, you know, I think those are the main reasons. And there's no money to be made from it really either. But one of the wonderful things about the crop formations is that they are designs and they have absolutely no copyright, for example, so no one can make money out of them, which is great. You know, but this blows open the whole thing.
My idea of it is that the evolution of the planet, the evolution of mankind, is a process that should be driven by our own forces. Now, why do you think that someone from another realm or another place in space or whatever are trying to interfere with our evolution?
Right. I don't think they are trying to interfere, because these things, it is entirely our free choice to give attention to these things. If they wanted to interfere, they would knock out our computers and our electronics and things like that to really give us a shock, you know. But they're not. They're doing it in the middle of fields, and it is entirely our choice to give these things attention. And even when that's the case, they're not giving any really clear answers. They're saying, form your own conclusions. What are your ideas on this? How do you respond to this? And so they're not interfering. They're more like very enlightened grown-ups working with kids. And, you know, and when you're teaching a child, it's best not to say, don't do this and do that. You know, that doesn't really educate a child. It's much better to give a child educational opportunities where they can become aware of the situation and make their own choices, you know, and you've got to set up that experience in a way where the child will figure it out well for themselves, and that is a real education, you know. And so I'd say they're not interfering, they're just giving us some gifts to see if we will respond. And one of the disappointing things is that the majority of people are not responding to this, which is quite shocking in a way. But in another way, there are enough people who are responding to be able to get the information and to record the phenomenon, so that when we get to the stage where humanity is interested in these things, at least we've got the records and we made the measurements and we took the samples and things. So they're not interfering, actually. They're just trying to give us some clues, okay, and some prompts to move forward. Okay. Really.
But anyway, the fact that they are giving us kind of clues and prompts to move forward, and are doing giving us a kind of an education, that means that they think that we need this education, or else they wouldn't have been doing anything.
Yes, that's true. But there are humans who believe that too. So this isn't exceptional. Like the more enlightened people in the world know that we've got a lot to learn, and yes. But does that mean that our evolutionary process is not going fast enough? I think that's true, yes. But you don't have to be a crop circle enthusiast to know that. I think any reasonably sensible person knows that. Yeah. And so we've got to move faster, and also I think the issues are simpler than we make them at heart. Like if we look at the world situation politically, the answers are actually quite basic and quite simple. We simply need to become more human towards each other, and if we use our human sensitivities and intelligence, we can solve so many of the world's problems today. The source of our problems are stupidity and greed and things like that,
Where do you think this is going to take us? What will be the development of the crop circles over the next years?
Well, this is a big question. And I think it is multi-dimensional. One of the things is that the crop formations are addressing not only our conscious psyche, but our unconscious psyche as well. And this is one of the big dynamics of our time, because our programmed, conditioned, conscious minds, educated minds, we have a particular worldview there. But there's something in our hearts and in our basic intelligence which is saying something different. And we're caught with conflicts, therefore, between two different parts of our being. And the crop circles are really catching this particular dilemma. Because, for example, with the crop formations, we can't explain them mentally. But if you go inside one of these things, if you've got any sensitivity at all, you just know, God, there's something about this which is just special, But it's rather parallel to what you might experience when you have a dear friend who dies. Mm. When they die, you just get a feeling there's something much more going on than this. You can feel the angels, if you see it that way. Or with people who are getting born as well. So there's something much, much deeper which is being addressed here. And I think one of the key things here is that the core solution to our world's issues does come from this deeper place. It comes from a point of forgiveness and a point of basic intelligence, where we realize all humans are essentially equal, and nature is in difficulty, and things like this. We're currently in Britain, for example, we're currently working with the question of war, and a majority of people have decided that war is no longer a solution to most kinds of situations. In a military country like Britain, this is amazing. And similarly, the Vikings were big warriors 1,000 years ago, and look at you now. It's sort of Norwegians will not be a cause of war. So something has been learned. And that was not necessarily a rational process. It was somewhere down here which said, enough is enough. There's something different going on here. let's get on with life, you know. So what's it leading towards? I think there's that basic internal thing, but there are other things which are very, very specific as well, to do with the laws of nature and our understanding of biology and physics and things like this. An example, our rational mind will tend to think that formations are made by a kind of a stamping from above. Yeah. I don't think that's true. In a way, I think they are sucked down from below by gravity, and somehow the circle makers have found a way of programming gravitational force very, very precisely to cause stalks of wheat to fall down in very exact ways, because the way these things are laid, it's like they went over it with a comb and every single stalk is in place. You know, if you've seen one of those, it's amazing, artistically amazing. And a human couldn't do that. They just couldn't do it. Even if they were paid £500,000, you know, they couldn't do it. And so there's that. There's also mathematics, where through the geometry and measurements and the proportions of the formations, there are mathematical theorems and formulae and problems which have been resolved here, which we have not yet resolved. And you'll hear people like Michael Glickman, for example, talking about squaring the circle and pi and the golden mean and all these kinds of geometrical issues. And there are new things to do with fractals and the relationships between different mathematical constants and things, which have been demonstrated in the crop formations. So they're obviously advancing our higher knowledge quite specifically in terms of mathematics. And so there are other things too, for example, to do with archaeology and understanding the nature and the location of ancient sites, and why the ancient people spent so much time building these things when they could have been enjoying themselves. Yeah. You know? And because many of the principles which are demonstrated in ancient sites, stone circles and all sorts of things, are also demonstrated in the crop formations. And so it's as if they're saying, look at the ancient sites, there's something important about these, and that was you humans. Yeah. You know, that was you humans doing that. You used to know something which you don't know now. So what is it? You know, look at this one. So they're giving us quite specific and precise knowledge. There's also stuff about the nuclear radiation, the subatomic particles that are present in crop formations, of which we can only manufacture some of them. Others we can do it, but it costs too much. With others we have identified them theoretically, but we can't actually create them. And then there are others which we've just discovered, which we didn't know were there, what they call short-lived radionuclides. And so we're being taught something about nuclear physics. And then there's biology as well, about the way in which the stalks get bent, not broken. And it has something to do with microwaving, or what we would call microwaving. We don't know. But there's some way in which these things are cooked to cause them to just bend like that in a very remarkable way, all at the same height and all this kind of thing. And of course, one of the beautiful things is that someone comes up with a theory and they say, oh well, it must have something to do with this or that, and it's got something to do with being close to the ground. And so the next year they come along and they bend it that high off the ground, so that there's no way it has, you know. So they're answering our theories, and they're saying, no, it's not that. You know, good idea, but it's not that. You know, and so we're getting some quite precise stuff, much of which we don't understand yet, but we have the data, and that's important because I had a big intuitive revelation about 7 or 8 years ago, and I was kind of trying to figure out how and when are we going to understand these things, because we don't seem to be making progress. And the answer which just came through was that we will understand these things when we have changed in such a way that we understand them.
Okay.
It will become simple all of a sudden. And it's a bit like growing up. Like when you're 12 years of age, it's very difficult to understand how credit cards work. But basically, once you've been in debt and once you've studied a little bit of economics, you understand how credit cards work, but it often takes you until you're in your 20s, And so it's a bit like growing up, really. There's something where we will become ready to understand these things at some stage, but until then it's a big question. It seems to me that really these things are pulled down from below because gravity... people, for example, have looked for UFOs and they think, oh, well, it must be UFOs that come down and they somehow kind of push it down from above. No, it's that there have been signs of UFOs, but it's not that. There's something to do with gravity fields and the ability of the circle makers to program gravity fields in a very, very specific and precise way so that they can pull down the stalks, boink, in a very, very precise way, and they can lay it in a very exact, artistic way. Some of these things, for example, are laid in ways where, when you photograph them from above, the light shines on the stalks in different ways, and it creates different effects, which is just amazing art. Amazing art. And so I think that this has something to do with future science as well. It's got something to do with the fact that light, gravity, electromagnetism and thought are all connected to each other. They are all part of the same spectrum of energy. And the Soviet scientists were beginning to get into this during the time of the Soviet Union. It's all over now, of course, but during the time of the Soviet Union. And I think this is one of our big technological breakthroughs for the future. At the moment, for example, they're trying to work with computers and they're putting implants in people's brains and all this kind of thing to see if they can have a direct relationship between the mind and computers. We don't need that. We just need to train our thought in some way so that the thought signals can be picked up technologically, and so that our technologies are also working with these subtle energies in ways which can have an engineering effect. And I think the crop circles are something of a demonstration of that. Really.
But I have to ask you this question.
Yeah.
Who are these circle makers?
Yeah, well, this is a good one. My answer is, I don't know. I don't know. And it's nevertheless possible to identify that they do have certain qualities to them. And so we don't know if it's God, the beings from Arcturus, ancient beings from ancient times, someone underneath the earth. We don't know anything about that. But what we do know is they are exceptionally intelligent. They're very, very good teachers. They really have got education well worked out. They have a lot of understanding of humans because, frankly, if they were like humans, they'd have walked away from us a long time ago because we didn't get the message. They're very, very patient. They can respond to us. They can talk directly to us. There's an example from Busty Taylor in the early 1990s, and they'd been crop circling, and he's a pilot, and they were flying over a formation, and he just speculatively said to his friend, "Do you know, I think the next one's going to be a Celtic cross. It's going to be five formations in a cross formation." They flew over the same place the next day, and there it was. There it was. So these guys can understand us, and they answer back, and they give us things in dialogue with us. And so there's that. They are also healers because there are some people who go through quite profound healing experiences. they have a spiritual component because people do have spiritual awakenings.
Yeah.
And so we can identify their characteristics even though we don't know who they are. But nowadays, people have asked, for example, are they ETs? And I think generally the answer is no. But nowadays people are calling them interdimensional intelligences, which I think is probably the most accurate term we can give at the moment. But that's only because our concepts are not good enough for anything better, you know.
But what about these balls of light that people seem to see?
Yes, well, the thing is that this borders into parapsychology, and there have been many paranormal phenomena connected with the crop formations. It's not just balls of light, it's auditory effects, you know, funny sound effects, cameras breaking down. You know, it's risky to take electronic equipment into a crop formation. And then there have been UFO sightings, funny kind of effects in the light and things like that. The balls of light themselves, there have been several different kinds of them, and I mean I work partially as a psychic, and I decided I'm going to try and get inside one of these things, and I had seen a ball of light which was a bit like a football, and it was kind of orange, a bit like a dull sun, and so I visualized this, and I had to fight quite hard to get inside it. But I got inside it, and the fascinating thing was that when I went inside it, it was enormous. It was like a vast hall, and there was all sorts of activity in there. So it made me get a feeling that these are kind of ways in which a superior consciousness can come into the Earth plane and take a look.
Okay.
So in a way, it's a bit like an American intelligence drone, you know, that flies over the Taliban and collects intelligence. You know, it's not actually an aeroplane with a human in it, and I'm not sure if it's even a being, but it's a bit like a remote camera, but on a much more dimensional level. That's the furthest I can get on these things, really.
Yes.
But there was a piece of film from, I think it was about 1996, that someone took, and it lasted about 5 or 6 seconds, and it was a young man who had been on a hill, and he was just panning around with a video camera, and suddenly this crop formation is happening down there, and so he filmed it, and he filmed the formation of it, and it took about 3 seconds for this thing to just come. It just went, you know, like that. And there were these little lights that were flying around it too and spinning off. And it didn't seem as if they were building, it didn't seem that they were making the formation, but it seemed as if they were observing it in some way and watching it. And I think the thing here is that, from my own understanding on an esoteric level, think about an angel, for example. An angel can't see physical matter. It can't see me, the physical form, but it can see me, the energy form, and it will read my energies off. And it won't hear my thoughts and my words, but it will hear and read the basic message behind those thoughts and the basic feeling behind those thoughts. And so there's a problem there. If you're working in physical Earth space, there's a problem, because you can get the essence of the matter, but you won't actually get the physics of it. And so if you were an angel and you were designing these things, then what you'd need to do is you'd need to send down a probe to get some photographs, you know, just like the Americans will send in a drone, you know. And so I think the balls of light probably have something to do with that, although that might not be the only thing. They've got something to do with energy too, because this relates to natural phenomena. You get phenomena like this in nature, things like St. Elmo's fire, and you get funny little well, you get balls of light in nature without crop formations as well. So I don't know how much this is to do with the deeper laws of nature, which we don't tend to recognize, and how much it is to do with intelligent beings doing things. And it might be a mixture of the two. But I think things like the balls of light are something like that, really. But they behave intelligently again. They respond to people's thoughts, and they play games with you. For example, one of them was that there was a piece of film made by a Dutch chap, and there was this light thing coming towards him, and the thing was that as it came closer to him, it got smaller. Right? And so it was saying you can't even trust your sense of three-dimensional perspective. You know, we're trying to show you something more than this. You know, and so it's beautiful. It's beautiful, this kind of stuff, even though we don't understand it. You know, but we don't understand love.
No. And
we don't understand childbirth. So this isn't so abnormal, really. You know, this is just another big mystery, but it's not the first one.
But it's, I mean, this tree is probably just as big a mystery as a crop circle. I mean, if you look at it as a piece of creation from the Creator, you know. Yes. So, but the only thing is that the crop circles are quite new to us. This tree is just a normal tree, you know. So.
Yes, it is, but you see, you look at this tree, and that's the tree trunk there, and there are the leaves and branches, but in another way, in terms of energy, we are actually inside that tree now. We're inside it, you know. And of course, the rational mind will think, well, stupid fool, you can't go inside a tree, you know, unless you get a chainsaw or something. But you know, the energy fields are quite different from the physical forms.
So maybe that's one of the things that we are supposed to learn with these crop circles, that we are energy beings, not physical beings.
Yes, and I think this is a very, very clear thing, because one of the things is, you see, there's a joke to all this. There's a joke. There's a trick, and that's this, that the most important thing about crop formations is not about the crop and the pattern. In a way, that's just a trick. It's like an advertisement in comparison to the real thing. Because when you go inside a crop formation, you walk inside an energy field which is very strong. And you don't have to be very sensitive to notice that. Anyone who is capable of loving another human being can feel that energy, and they will feel different when they come out. And one of the feelings you can get is it's almost as if you have been slightly fried, as if the cells in your body have been slightly irradiated with some sort of radiation, but you do feel different. And so this is primarily an energy field, and they're trying to get us to walk into that energy field or to interact with it visually and in our thoughts, even through a photograph. They're trying to get us to interact with it because it's that energy field which is the important thing. Okay. And in the end, the crop itself is just the container. And this goes back to an old teaching that Lao Tzu gave us 2,500 years ago. And he was saying the essence of a cup is its empty innermost.
Yes.
You know, a cup has no purpose apart from the fact that it contains an empty space. And it is similar with a room or a car or something like that. The most important part of a car is actually the empty space in it. And the most important part of a crop formation is the empty space inside it. And of course, in our Western way of thinking, we don't value emptiness. We only value form.
Yes.
And so we've got to be given that form in order to trick us to get inside that energy field and take in that energy, really. So it's a bit like having a bath or something like that. You know, it is sinking yourself in this energy, and that's one of the most special things about entering crop formations. I've seen people cry when they go in, you know, and And people have such profound experiences. Or if you lie down and you float off for 20 minutes, and then you look at your watch and 4 hours have gone past. You get that kind of thing happening. And so it's got something to do with getting us to become familiar with energy in a way which we otherwise don't do, or we're not conscious of, really.
So one conclusion that we can draw for certain is that we're not alone in the universe.
I think that's true, yes. I think that's true. Yes, we're not alone in the universe. And there is something, I mean, again, for me at the beginning, when I first saw the crop formations, I mean, I had been doing a lot of spiritual work and psychic work for years before, but my first real impression was, God, that's our friends. It's them, they're back, was my feeling. And I didn't know where that came from, because I don't even really know now who I'm talking about. But I do know it's our friends. And there's a deeper element to this as well, and that is that there's a part of us where we are not separate. I only met you half an hour ago, but you're beginning to become my brother, and I don't know you, and you don't know me. But when we connect on a certain level of openness, we become brothers and sisters. Mm-hmm. And so there's something where there's a tremendously fast thing where we become one. Yes. In some way. And so there's something here where we are not alone. And I don't know whether these are ETs or beings or angels or whatever it is. I don't know. And perhaps it doesn't matter. Perhaps it doesn't matter. This is stuff in the brain, Mm. This is about, is he American or is he Chinese? Yeah. Does it matter? Yeah. The main thing is this person an interesting person? Are they a good person to relate to? That's what matters.
Yeah. But I mean, if you look at the universe as a kind of if you don't look at it as if it is physical matter, but as if it is energy in different types of density. Yeah. And that all this matter, all these different energies are actually just different parts of the creator energy. I mean the mother energy of it all. Yeah. And that we are just, like you and me, we are just different faces of the same original energy. Yeah. I mean, if you start thinking that way, then it's very easy to understand that. I mean, you are my brother. It's not that you're just my brother. Obviously you're a part of me, as I'm a part of you, as we are a part of everything. Yeah. Yeah. So I think that's why you get this feeling when you see a crop circle. It's actually just another part of you speaking to you, a part of you that you may not remember, because you're in this relative realm where the meaning is that you're not going to remember everything. Yes. Because if you remember everything, you don't get the experiences that you're here for. Yes. But when you see this, it may be somewhere in your subconscious reminds you of where you're coming from or something like that.
Yes, this is interesting, because one of the fantastic things is that with a few exceptions, when people first see the crop formations, there's something in them that recognizes these things. It's not new. There's something we remember with it. But the fascinating thing is that with a few exceptions, all of these designs are new. They're not exactly the same as symbols and art forms that we have had in all of the human cultures. And people have done a lot of research on this to try and find symbols which are exactly the same. Yeah. And there have been a few, but not very many. Yeah. Most of these symbols are new symbols, and yet there's this feeling of recognition and of, I remember that in some way. And so yes, this is connecting with a source of knowledge which is deeper down than our conscious knowledge, or even our culturally conditioned historic knowledge. Yes. And so there is something, about memory. It's And this is also where past and future melt into one as well, because it's difficult to tell, is this the past talking to us or is this the future? And the answer is both. And so it's a tricky, it's intellectually tricky to deal with. But there's another thing too, and that is that once we've established that we are one, the next question is, well, what are we going to do about that? And how do we go forward from there? And that's where we get into the details again, and that's where we have to identify our differences.
Yes.
Your language is Norwegian, my language is English.
Yes.
And we can communicate with one another, but we have different backgrounds and different ways of seeing things. And so while we can accept that we are one in essence, we are also different, and so we've got to work with those differences. I do a lot of work with Israelis and Palestinians, for example, and here we have people who are genetically and culturally brothers and sisters. They are of the same family, and yet they're killing one another, they're really... And similarly, we in Britain are so neurotic about our European neighbours, for example, But these are our people, this is our tribe. They are Europeans.
Yes.
They are closer to us than Chinese and Africans and people like that. And so we've and one of the big questions of the 21st century is about this business about how do we deal with the fact that we are, in one place we are the same or similar, but in another way we're very, very different. Men and women, for example. You can love, as a man you can love a woman and you can feel at one with her, but then a few years later, and the funny thing is that the people you most love are the people you can get into the darkest problems with. And so it's not just about how we are all one, it is also about the precise details which make us different, which are the essence of creation, and it is the essence of our political problem, our geopolitical problem on planet Earth today. And it is also the big question of physics and science, about the differences between things. It is the big question about mathematics, that yes, everything does resolve itself into zero eventually, but basically you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and all of the different permutations of numbers that you can have before you reach infinity. And so it's fascinating. It's fascinating. And I don't know exactly where this is leading, but it's certainly leading us up this path. And in that sense, I think it's brilliant, and they are directly addressing sophisticated Westerners here, that you don't get crop circles in Africa. Why? Africans don't need them. It's we who need them. It's the rational people, we're caught here, and our hearts are all closed down, and we walk on the earth, but we don't feel it. And we look at each other, but we don't know each other. And so there's something where we're being taken on a psychological and spiritual initiatory course here.
I started now 11 years ago with doing a project for school on crop circles. This is why I came here first in 1994. So, and I came here and I thought, if this is all just flattened crop, you have a nice summer, but you don't have to return. And this is, as I said, my 11th summer now. So it was the other way around.
And can you tell me a little bit how your interest has developed from just being curious to what you are now?
Well, it always was because it started everything with a school project. I had always the idea that I want to bring it in the frontier science and normal science into a balance, because I realized that the crop circles are the only phenomenon, or so-called paranormal phenomenon, which the existence is not a question of believing it or not, and they don't fly away or disappear or whatever, show up only for special people. Their existence, they are here and you cannot deny them. So I thought this is the perfect subject for a more or less scientific study or a scientific approach. And that's what the crop circles are, and that's what I think is so fascinating about it, because it connects the two views, let's say esoteric or spiritual or frontier scientifical, to the very rational and logic science.
Can you, in relative short terms, give me an idea of what kind of research you have been conducting?
Well, the one part is that I collected I created the ICCA, which is the International Crop Circle Archive, which has become one of the world's most extensive databases on the crop circle, with over 5,000 records on crop circles in 50 countries around the world since many centuries. And what I do basically documentation here in England, and do background research, speaking to the farmers, doing. Also, a great part of my work is that I do research into the historic part of the phenomenon. I do archive works in libraries and everything to find out if there are evidence for the crop circles being much older than most people think. And so that's a big part of my work.
Could you explain how you feel that this has started and how long it has been going on?
The strange thing is that most people think that crop circles are a new phenomenon beginning somewhere in the 1970s, in a time where there's a lot of media attention and people go out making crop circles to get that attention. And I and other researchers as well discovered that there is evidence for the phenomenon to be much, much older. And what I've discovered is that there are already legends and tales around the world, really spinning around the globe, where you don't know when they start. And the strange thing, or the interesting thing, is that all these, or most of these stories, connect to each other. There are stories and legend by the native Indians in America, and they have big similarities to stories we have in Central Europe, where crop circles play an important part in. And so even when we got the first kind of documents like pamphlets or so, crop circles appear there. You know, the famous mowing devil woodcut. And even later we discovered that there is a report published in the Nature magazine already in 1880 about a field that was flattened completely into circles. It's more or less a meteorological report, but it clearly describes what we would call today crop circles. And so over and over there's nearly no decade where we don't have crop circle reports, and there are so many witnesses of early crop circles. Many farmers, if you talk to them, they remember having played in crop circles when they were kids, and remember stories from their parents and even their grandparents about the crop circles. And there is, around the world, we can find that the crop circles have played such an important part in the daily life, even centuries ago, that they have become part of the folklore and part of the culture. There is evidence that crop circles have appeared in Africa, southern Africa, and that the natives there took them as communications with their gods. And the appearance of new circles were the cause for day-long celebrations and rituals. And they clearly, I'm in contact with a medicine man, with a very important one, and he clearly says that this is a very old tradition, and they always were seen as something very important. And one also has to say, because skeptics sometimes say, you know, those may have been wind damage or something that people misinterpreted. But this is not the case, because especially the people in the country were aware of what is wind damage or animal damage. But they differed other things they have discovered in the field, and of course they explained it always from their point of view, from their what they were thinking was the state of the art. And I think that the aliens many people bring in today are the devils of the medieval, and I don't know what they will call the crop circle for us in 100 years. So this is a very good, even a kind of mirror to social and to human development and culture.
But you mentioned that the crop circles have been referred to all over the world, actually. Mm-hmm. In your home country, Germany, could you tell us a little bit about the development there?
Yeah, that's the very similar case. We have very old legends of a king or a farmer having a good field of crop, and he was so proud of it, so he went every day there. And then he discovered a crop circle and he got angry. But when he had a closer look, he was not that angry anymore, because he realized it is not just flattened and ruined crop, it's something else. And they were referred to fairies, that they were dancing there. And even here, then we have a report of the mid of the 19th century of an eyewitness who reports that there were circles and rings all over around his area for many, many years, and people gave those things real names like fairy rings. And they are today, fairy rings are also the rings caused by fungus. But we have proof by, for example, the Grimm brothers in their historical writing, that in old days the term fairy rings was also used for the discolored rings as well as the flattened circles and rings. And so it went on. We have proof from nearly every decade of circles being around. Of course, we don't know what the early circles did look like, because people were not able to fly them, but and see them from above. And then it started as everywhere again in the early 90s, when the public awareness was quite big. Of course, more and more pictograms and formations were discovered, and maybe have been hoaxed by copycats. But still, we have an interesting phenomenon taking place in Germany, and especially because we have some crop circles made by the same hoaxers who claim to have made the good ones, which are completely of a very low quality. And so we have the same analyses have been done by BLT on German formations, and so we are quite ahead with, for example, England and other countries.
Okay. But how do you explain the development of the designs?
I don't know if there is really what people call a development, or I mean there is, because you can see every year there are other designs. But for example, it is always a question, the big Miracle formation of 2001, people say, oh, it's the most complex formation or complicated formation. It is not. It was the biggest and with the most circles in it, but its geometry is very basic. So one always has to put it into a real reference to what is really a complicated geometry. But what I've also learned from the study of the historic crop circles is that there were times where crop circles showed up in the fields. Even here in this area, in Avebury, we have reports from Hackpen Hill or so, dating back about into the 30s-40s. Then it seems there was a time where there were no crop circles, and now we're getting them back again, and they do a development like a up and down. So maybe that's the reason what it is. And even, also nature shows sometimes very close geometries to very complicated crop circles. And nature is also something that shows an evolution and development from the simple thing to a complicated thing. So I think this could be part of the whole thing, and we may have approached the apex yet. And it's getting back again maybe, and in a few years we have no crop circles anymore. This could happen because history showed that it happened already. But also history teaches us that they will come back. So,
of course, I have to ask you the central question. Who do you think is behind this? And why is it happening?
Right. As you said, it's the big question. And I myself feel that crop circles have much more in common with unknown processes, phenomena, but also with miracles and wonders in nature, as they have with little green men, and of course as they have with people going out to field flatten crop. Because I see a lot of similarities in what nature performs as geometrical shape and wonders, and it simply makes to me more sense. But I don't mean that this is a normal phenomenon like rain and storm. It has something more. I call it sometimes a non-natural phenomenon. It has a kind of what's the word for that? It is a supernatural, natural phenomenon, and I don't know why they are here. I see that they are here, and I feel also that the state of research is not on such a point that we can answer this big question, why and who is doing the real phenomenon. But as long as you realize that there's a real phenomenon, and this is an important point to make, then all the man-made ones and all the hoaxed ones are not important at all. Like a Van Gogh, the original is the important thing, not the copy you can buy in a drugstore. So.
How do you interpret these formations? What do you think is actually going on?
Well, when we look at these designs, it's obvious very quickly that they are not just simple circles, simple design, that they have a very specific construction, and that construction can be deciphered, can be read from many different angles. It can be read through its geometry. It can be read through the inherent mathematics that are encoded in the construction, and there is usually a reference to an ancient symbol. So we by going back to the ancient symbol, we can extract the meaning from the ancient symbol, and then the mathematics has its own meaning, and so has the geometry. But the interesting thing is that it tends to be the same. We find that I'm looking from ancient symbol, but the people who understand the mathematics find the same meaning in it, and the same meaning in the geometry, so it can be read from different angles, and from different levels too. So it's very interesting that these three link together, and that is very rare, because it's not purely an ancient symbol, it's never exactly, except for the Barbary Castle, except for sometimes you have one that is really truly like an ancient symbol, but mostly it refers to an ancient symbol, but it's not exactly the same. We had a Mayan elder who came last year, and she said the Mayan glyph, I'm sure you remember, opposite Silbury Hill, and we took her there. It arrived the same day as she did. And she said, it's our most sacred symbol, but it's not exactly like our ancient symbol. It is, but it's not exactly like it. It has other dimensions attached to it. And when people like Benoit Mandelbrot of fractal fame looks at these fractals, he says, these are mathematical fractals, but there's an added dimension to it. It has a spiritual dimension, like an ancient symbol. So that's new. That's new, because it brings in advanced knowledge with very ancient knowledge, and from different angles. And it makes a new whole, a new symbol, a new design.
What do you feel these patterns are doing to us as humans?
Any knowledge has the power to transform. Whether it's knowledge through mathematics, and you know how a mathematician gets excited when they discover new laws of the universe and so on. So it has the power to transform the way we see things. And transformation is always at that level. It's always a transformation of the way we see things. When that changes, everything changes, because we express everything through our understanding of how things go, how things are. So a symbol has always been the way to transmit knowledge. Knowledge has always been transmitted through symbols, because you can put many, many layers of meaning in a symbol, which you can't when it's written in a book. So it's a visual thing, but it has many, many, many layers of meaning. Mathematics is the same, but mathematics doesn't have a spiritual dimension, whereas ancient symbol has a spiritual dimension. So the mathematicians who study this are, without realizing, they look at the mathematics and they enter a spiritual dimension. And the people who study it from an ancient knowledge, which was a spiritual teaching, and actually connect with a mathematical understanding and a geometry. So it opens everybody's perception, whichever angle you take it from. It's very transformative. Symbols are about understanding what kind of world we live in. And it explains, it transmits the understanding of how the universe works and the kind of laws we're under. And this is actually a spiritual teaching. Mathematics will go into it and try to explain it from the point of view of matter, of the effect of that on the physical. The ancient knowledge is talking about principles and concepts behind the physical, you see. So to reach that level of understanding, you have to go above the physical. You have to rise your mind above what you can see, touch, feel, taste, and so on. You have to raise above the physical. And in that sense, you're learning, you're growing in understanding. The ancient expression, growing in understanding, that's exactly that. You grow in understanding. Whereas if you bring everything down to, oh, it's not laid properly, oh, it's not quite straight, you bring everything down and you don't look at the symbol, you just look at the physical aspect. You bring it down to your own level of what should be right and what should fit your idea, you know. So that's what I was trying to explain in my lecture, that it's here to raise our consciousness, but the human mind has the tendency to try and drag everything down to its level. But this is a chance now. We have to really begin to see the big picture.
Where do you think this is going to take us, Francine?
Well, it's going to take us to a more universal way of understanding, universal knowledge. This is universal knowledge. Ancient symbols are for everybody, for all time. They're timeless, and they're not restricted. They're not fundamental, like fundamentalist teaching. You know, it's really learning about the principle, the concept, that which is behind the physical, because the physical is simply a denser reality. But it comes from there. It's a denser vibration. So if you understand these rules, these principles, and these concepts, then we understand what kind of world we live in, you see. And if we do that, once we begin to understand what kind of world we live in, we begin to fit better in it, actually, because it gives us respect, you know. And so I see the crop circle as a teaching, because we all learn. You mentioned when I arrived that you like to come here because people can discuss all sorts of metaphysical ideas and so on. Once you enter this space, you enter a different reality, actually. And you begin to ask questions. Crop circle makes us question. Why is it here? What kind of world do I live in? How can it be here? You know, all these are questions that come up when you enter a crop circle, and you begin to see to look at the bigger picture, rather than be concentrated just on the mundane, Monday to Friday, make enough money to pay the bills and that, at that level. You begin to want to understand, you know, what kind of world is this? You know, what is it that I live in? And what's my place in it? Who am I in all that? It opens these doors, you see.
Why just here, concentrated in a small area in Wiltshire?
They tend to come near ancient sites, near where our ancestors all over the world considered sacred. And they considered these places sacred because they felt that there was a possibility of raising their consciousness in these areas. And that's why they build their temples there. And they build their temples in areas where the lines of energy of the earth meet or connect, or there's a nodal point. And there is actually a natural energy that stimulates this. And that's why they build the stone temples there, and then the cathedrals were built on top of that. You see, most cathedrals are built on ancient stone circles, using the same stones, because that space has that energy in it, that as soon as you enter that space, you're different. You know, you enter a cathedral, your spirit is elevated immediately. It's the same with crop circles, you get the same feeling. You enter a space that is quite sacred. And it's sacred because it can feed the soul. You know, and these areas some are stronger than others, some are more important than others. We were told by a Tibetan Lama that Avebury is actually the heart chakra of the world, and so this was always a land that was magical and a land that was spiritual. It's the most spiritual area of the British Isles, actually. So it's not surprising that crop circles come here. Crop circles need to be, they're bringing us back to our ancient understanding, to the ancient sites, and to the ancient sites of power where we can actually be fed. When we enter a crop circle, we receive that energy, you see. It's always in line. Look, Silbury Hill, yes. West Kennet, Long Barrow. So they bring us to the old building, to the old temples.